morning. Hello, I'm Miss Carla. Today we're going to continue with Ghost Squad by Claribel A. Ortega. And I had to have my mask on for a minute there because Miss Donna was over on this side of the library. And I wanted to be careful, but now she's way over on her side, so we're okay. So, last time on Monday, I misjudged how much time I had left, and we had to stop in the middle of a chapter, which I know is very frustrating. So today we're going to pick up where we left off, and I will read maybe the paragraph ahead, back that we read last time to get us through here. Let's see. Okay, so a legion of voices rang out. This was... What was happening? Oh, right, she got transported to a strange place with the tree, and they're trying to tell her something. Okay. Away, away, we shall not fear. Away, foul beast, and far from here. The mist monster screamed as it was thrown backward into the brush. As the fight continued, a soft voice found its way out of the masses and wrapped itself around Lucily, warm and comforting like her favorite wool blanket. It was a voice as clear as a church bell, swooping and curling around her like a small, cream and brown palm chat in flight. It was a voice she would know anywhere. "Mama," Lucily whispered. Her own voice seemed to echo and amplify in the storm as if it were carried by magic. "The spirit of the Cucuyos have been here for centuries, mi niña, protecting our family and St. Augustine from evil spirits who wish to bring nothing but destruction." Mama's voice whirled around them like an arrow made of wind and air and light. "Our family is one of just 2 ancient orders charged with keeping this city and its inhabitants safe. But there is a new danger approaching, one that threatens to take us all, including the living, into the underworld." Mama appeared before her, unfazed by the monster's attacks. Just then the mist monster launched itself from the brush, flames erupting from its mouth. "Mama!" Lucily cried out, but the fire seemed to extinguish itself as soon as it reached her abuela. "I'm not strong like you. I'm just a kid. How am I supposed to stop whatever evil is coming?" "You don't have to do it alone," Mama said, just as she transformed into a spark of brilliant blue light. The light shot up into the air, and then with a giant thud, Mama's spirit, now at least the height of the willow tree, landed next to Lucily, her slippered feet spread apart, and her cane cracking the ground beneath her. Her gray hair moved like the waves of the ocean around her wrinkled face. She looked fierce and terrible and powerful. The mist monster cowered behind a bush, its fire reduced to ash, and Mama floated toward Lucily. "You don't have to do it alone because we are with you, always." Mama ran one giant finger along Lucily's cheek and smiled. "I am with you always." Mama returned to her normal size and placed one hand on Lucily's heart. "Here." The trees surrounding Lucily began to blend together until the entire scene looked like a Van Gogh painting. An instant later, Lucily was back in her kitchen where her cousin lay motionless on the floor. "Manny!" Lucily ran over and knelt down next to him. She reached out a hand to feel for a heartbeat before remembering that he hadn't had one for 10 years. All she could do was sit and wait. 5 minutes passed, and Manny still didn't wake up. Tears filled Lucily's eyes as she thought that she'd lost her cousin forever. Manny groaned as he strained to move. "That was weird." Lucily bolted to attention. "Are you okay? Did you see that mist monster thing too?" "Yeah, but I'm not sure how or why. I just felt angry, like pure rage was flowing through my veins." Manny sat up, his hands shaking. "It was like something was controlling me. I'm sorry, Lucy. I didn't mean to scare you. I'm just glad you're okay. Lucy wrapped her arms around her cousin and squeezed tightly. You could never really scare me, Manny, no matter what weirdo things you do. Manny laughed, pushing her away in mock offense. But what did Mama mean when she said that our family is one of two ancient orders protecting St. Augustine? And why is this happening now? I don't know, Lucy, but you heard Mama. Something evil is coming. The look in Manny's eyes was one of fear, the same look Mama had had right before she went haywire. Lucille shivered, though she would never admit to Manny. Whatever was happening terrified her, and she was ashamed. Don't worry, cuz. I'm going to find a way to fix this. That's the end of the chapter. Then that brings us to chapter 6. Oh, and I wanted to mention two things real quick. One is, the character Mama is Lucille's grandmother, even though Mama means mom in Spanish. So I think it's just like a nickname for the grandmother. Like some people call their grandma Nana or things like that. So I think it's just, even though it sounds like she's calling her mom, she has a mother who's just not there. This is her grandmother that's nicknamed Mama. The other thing I wanted to mention is there are a lot of similes in this writing. If you're not sure what a simile is, it's a comparison that uses the word like or as. It's like a metaphor, similar to a metaphor, except for metaphors kind of pretend that a thing really is something different. They don't use like or as. A simile is just, it's more like straightforward by saying, well, it's not this, but it's kind of like this. So there was a really good one. The soft voice, it says, wrapped itself around Lucille, warm and comforting, like her favorite wool blanket. And then later it compared the voice to like a small cream and brown palm chat in flight, which I'm assuming is some kind of bird. I'm not familiar with a palm chat. But anyway, that's just something interesting about this writing, which is pretty cool. Chapter 6. Lucille checked her watch for the 700th time as she waited at the end of her street. It was 9:52 p.m., and Sid still hadn't shown up. She bit her lip, wondering if she'd gotten caught sneaking out. But Sid was slicker than any kid or adult Lucille knew. There was no way she'd gotten caught if Lucille hadn't. A few more minutes passed, and despite the light chill in the air, Lucille started to sweat. At least she wasn't totally alone out there. Her cousin Macarena flew around inside the mason jar Lucille had attached to her bike. When she had told the fireflies of their plan, Macarena jumped at the chance to join them on their late-night escapade. Even as a ghost, her FOMO was real. FOMO, fear of missing out. The cemetery was close, just a few minutes' walk. But the thought of going without Sid was too scary, especially after what she'd seen lately. And without the key, she had no way of getting into Anastasia's mausoleum. Lucille furrowed her brow, trying to think of a backup plan, when Sid's bike finally screeched to a halt next to her. "What took you so long?" Lucille asked. "My dad was practicing for an upcoming concert, so it took him longer to go to bed than usual. Mom, on the other hand, was snoring before the saxophone even reached his lips," Sid joked. Lucille snorted. "Let's go before it gets any later. I don't want to run into Babette when she's got the late-night munchies." A solitary lamp stood at the entrance of the cove where Babette's house tucked itself away from the rest of the world. It looked like a completely different place in the dark. A sign reading, "A witch lives here," had been nailed to a tree with the words, "Babette's Baubles," scribbled underneath. Beyond the sign, the house stood in the middle of a swampy lake, a twisted shadow of a structure that seemed to be craning its neck to snoop on the woods surrounding it. It looked almost like a creepy black and white movie came to life, except for the solitary splash of color. Babette's purple front door. I hate this, Lucily said. It's so much creepier at night. Come on, it's just Babette's. Sid's voice was confident, but Lucily knew, by the way she kept touching her braids, that she was scared too. We're going to have to take the footbridge, Lucily said. No way! Sid shot Lucily a horrified look. I am not going over that thing at night. Look, we have to sneak into Babette's house one way or another to get the key to the mausoleum. And if we take the rowboat, we'll be caught for sure. That is, if we don't flip over and drown in the dead of night first. Plus, that swamp gives me the willies. Sid raised one finger and opened her mouth to argue, but Lucily jumped back in before she could say anything. And if we have to make a break for it, we'll have to row back across so Babette won't notice the boat is on the wrong shore. It would be a lot simpler just to creep across the footbridge. If we fall in, I'm telling Babette you hypnotized me. Fine. Lucily smiled triumphantly. It wasn't easy to win an argument with Sid. I don't know why mausoleums need locks anyway. It's not like people are dying to break in. Lucily shook her head before cracking a smile. Okay, that one was pretty good. They leaned their bikes against a tree and crept toward the footbridge. You go first, Sid whispered. I'm shocked that you'd sacrifice me like this. I thought we were friends. It was your idea to take this cursed path, Sid protested. Both girls kept their voices low. Let's go across together, at least, Lucily said. Fine, you owe me so much. I hope you know that. They held hands as they stepped onto the bridge together. I guess this is how I go, Sid muttered, but despite the bridge being super old and creaky, they got across without incident. Lucily let out a sigh of relief. See? Yeah. Come on before Babette's witchy senses wake her up. Sid found the spare key Babette kept hidden beneath a frog statuette that had been enchanted to look and, unfortunately, feel real. Once inside, they crept toward the library. Lucily said a silent prayer that the house would be too tired to play any tricks on them tonight. The light from Sid's phone reflected off a mirror, causing them both to jump, thinking they'd for sure been caught. A low-clipped meow came from the hallway, and Lucily and Sid spun around in tandem. It's just Chunk, Lucily whispered. Come here, girl. Lucily held her hand out, and Chunk shuffled toward her. Meow? We're just looking for a key, Chunk, Sid said. Even though Chunk was a cat and couldn't understand what they were saying, Lucily and Sid always spoke to her as if she were human. Chunk collapsed dramatically on Lucily's feet and looked up. Meow. This time, her cry seemed to hold a warning. No time for your ominous meowing, Chunk, Sid said. Lucily tried to pull away, but Chunk had now wrapped her body around Lucily's legs. I can't move, Lucily said. Just keep her occupied. I'll find the keys, Sid said, turning the corner up ahead. Chunk began howling now, and Lucily tried her best to calm her down. Hurry, Sid, Lucily pleaded, hoping Babette was a deep sleeper. Sweat trickled down Lucily's forehead, her stomach doing somersaults. A few moments later, Sid returned. I couldn't find the keys, she told Lucily. Babette must have moved them. Chunk sauntered out of the room, immediately disinterested in them, probably to find a box to squeeze into and sleep. Sid quirked an eyebrow knowingly in the cat's direction. I think I hear footsteps coming from upstairs. We have to go before Babette sees us. Sid took Lucily's hand, and as quietly as they could manage, they bolted out the door. The front door flew open, and Babette stood on her porch, an elegant shadow. Lucily and Sid had run as far as they could without a light, and crouched behind a giant bush to catch their breath. Whoever you are, you don't know who and what you're messing with, Babette warned. Her voice carried in the night air, commanding and threatening. Babette Fairs will be your thorn. All around them they could see the garden coming to life, thorny vines whipping and striking at the air. The sound of the door slamming shut propelled them both out from behind the bush and across the footbridge. Lucily had never run faster in her life. By the time they reached the other side of the cove, both girls were out of breath and shaking. "We almost died," Sid said. "And all for nothing," Lucily replied. "Not for nothing." Sid smirked, reaching into her pocket and pulled out a ring of large, rusty skeleton keys. "I thought you said you couldn't find—" Chunk was being weird. "I swear sometimes I think she's Babette's spy. Better to be safe than sorry. Come on, before I change my mind about disturbing the dead." When Lucily and Sid made it to the cemetery, the moon was directly overhead, casting an eerie glow over the McMaster family mausoleum in front of them. "I'm not opening it." Sid handed the keys to Lucily. "First the footbridge, and now this? I'm beginning to question our friendship." Lucily shook her head. Above the ancient marble doors were some words that looked like Latin. She hoped they weren't some sort of curse. Lucily tried several keys before the right one clicked into place, opening the door with a sound that reminded her of her Tio Fernando attempting to get out of his recliner. It was cooler inside the mausoleum than outside in the humid Florida heat. Even at night, the air was almost unbearable. As soon as they entered the room, a pungent odor filled Lucily's nostrils. It smelled like dirty gym socks and moldy cheese, and she had to hold her breath to keep from barfing. The light from their cell phones reflected off the marble walls, illuminating a row of square headstones on the back wall, each marked with the name of a deceased family member. "Okay then, do the thing." Sid flailed her hands. "What thing?" "I don't know. Find Anastasia's coffin and look inside? This was your idea." "No way. I'm not sticking my hand inside a coffin." "Then why did we even come here?" Lucily sighed, hating that Sid was right. If they had any hope of finding the missing pages, they had to look everywhere. Together, they stepped up to Anastasia's casket and shifted the heavy lid aside just enough for Lucily to reach down and run her hands along the inner walls of the coffin. The smooth marble felt like silk on Lucily's hands. Then her fingers grazed against rough stone. "Wait, I may have found something," Lucily said, breathless. Sid shone what little light she could through the gap where Lucily's hand had been. "I can't really see anything in there." Lucily plunged her arm back into the dark space. "Let me see if I can shimmy whatever it is free from the wall." A cloud of dust erupted as she pulled the rough-hewn stone from its place, and both girls jumped back, waving their hands wildly and coughing. "Gross, dead people dust," said Sid. When the air finally cleared, the empty space where the stone had once sat was now visible. A rolled-up piece of paper peeked out from the space behind the stone. They looked at each other, mouths open. "Is that—" But before Sid could finish, Lucily had reached in and grabbed the paper, settling onto the cool marble bench nearby. Sid moved to join her, holding up her light as Lucily delicately unrolled the parchment. "I think it's in Latin or something." Lucily ran her eyes over the odd words and symbols. She turned the paper over, but there was nothing on the other side. "Maybe we could try translating it on our phones?" As soon as Lucily had said the words, the inscription began to change. Like a puff of smoke passing over the paper, the once illegible words were now all in English. "Whoa," said Sid. Lucily gulped as she read the first few words on the paper aloud. "A spell to wake the sleeping." "You think this might be one of the missing pages from the spell book?" Lucily extracted the book from inside her jacket, opened it to the back, and compared the piece of paper to the torn edges in the book. It was a match. This was it. Lucily looked to Sid, who cleared her throat in response. "Hold on, I have an idea. Point the flashlight at the floor." Sid took a piece of white chalk from her pocket and drew a large pentagram on the floor. Of course, Sid knew how to draw a perfect pentagram. When she had finished, they both sat down in the middle of the magical symbol, the concrete ground cold beneath them. Lucily shivered. "Maybe this is a bad idea. I mean, what if something goes wrong?" Sid sighed. "Lucy, it's either this or nothing. You want to save your fireflies, don't you? We can't chicken out now." Lucily turned it over in her mind. There really wasn't anything else she could think to do, especially now that they were here with a possible answer in their hands. She nodded at Sid and said a silent prayer that things would work out. Together. Sid took hold of Lucily's hands as they began to read the rest of the inscription aloud. Lavender, lilies, blossom and bloom, I call on the spirits to enter this room. They paused and looked around. Fear had been creeping up on Lucily since she left her house, and now it was raging. Rotten and putrid beneath the trees, I call on the spirits and let them roam free. Lucily held her breath, Sid's hands tightening around hers. They waited 1 minute, then another. A strong breeze swept through the room, chilling Lucily to the bone, but aside from that, nothing particularly magical seemed to happen. Maybe check on Macarena? Said Sid. Lucily unclipped the small mason jar from her backpack and tapped gently on the glass. Maca? Macarena flew out of the jar, appearing before Lucily, and yawned. Everything okay, Lucy? She asked. Lucily hesitated. Do you feel anything different with Mama's spirit? Her cousin closed her eyes and took a deep breath, letting it out slowly. Sorry, Prima. It feels the same as it was before. Lucily sighed, fighting back tears. So the spell to wake the sleeping hadn't worked to heal Mama and the rest of the firefly spirits. Thanks for trying. You can go back to sleep now. Macarena shrugged sleepily before transforming back into a firefly and settling at the bottom of her jar. Huh, that's weird. I didn't see this on the paper before. Sid pointed at 2 letters that had appeared. E-B. What do you think it means? Lucily asked. Sid shrugged. Could be the initials of the witch that created the spell? Well, whoever it was must not have been very good at magic. Lucily tucked the useless paper into the spell book. They waited a while longer, hoping for some other sign that the spell had worked, but when it was obvious that nothing was going to happen, they made their way out of the mausoleum. Lucily and Sid felt defeated as they walked back to their bikes. A crack sounded from somewhere behind them. Get down, shh, Lucily whispered, diving behind a nearby gravestone. A shadowy figure stalked across the cemetery and toward the mausoleum where Lucily and Sid had just been, seemingly oblivious to their presence. Is that Mayor Anderson? Sid asked. The figure was becoming clearer in the moonlight. A ridiculously tall man, hunched over, a long, fluffy handlebar mustache hanging from his face. It certainly looked like Mayor Anderson. What is the mayor doing creeping around the cemetery in the middle of the night? Asked Sid. Lucily gave her a grim look, and they both turned their attention back to the entrance of the mausoleum, waiting for him to come out. Moments later he emerged. Something seemed different about him. It was almost as if he were floating instead of walking, but in jerky, unstable motions. His gaze shifted in their direction, locking in on their hiding place as if he could see them through the darkness. Lucily held back a scream when she noticed Mayor Anderson's eyes, which were now glowing an unnatural green. Spooky. That's the end of the chapter, so we'll stop there. We will start next Monday with chapter 7 and page 72. I hope you enjoyed that. If you're preparing for the holidays, I hope you are having fun with that. I put up my Christmas tree yesterday? The day before yesterday. I put up my Christmas tree and some decorations in my living room. And it's beautiful and cheery. So I will see you on Monday. Have a good weekend.